That would be a hell of a lot easier. I'd storyboard it first and then we'd write it. But I'm choosing this method, which is total stream of consciousness. I'm trying to work out the muscle that essentially is the imagination. Work out the muscle that's making it up on the fly. Oh man, you want to hear something really upsetting? I made a video yesterday and it's gone. That's my first time that's ever happened to me. Long story short, I kept relying on faulty technology and it fucked me over. So we lost an entire video and I think it probably was one of my best ones. I don't know how that goes. I guess that one was for me. I'll try to hash it out, okay? It's not gonna be good. But essentially I was going on as a continuation from the previous video where I was like, yeah, you know, can't seem to enjoy everything, can't seem to find joy in other people's work and stuff. And then I really dwelled on that some more and I thought, well, what is it about these things? And essentially I was saying to myself, well, it's hard for me to enjoy someone else's work because it turns me off, right? Was what I was saying. And then I got thinking, well then what do I do in place of that? Well, I work on my own stuff. I work on my own novel and my own mythology and all that stuff that comes with it. And I've been doing that, but why is it becoming so hard for me to do that part? And then it dawned on me. Okay? I just saved you like fucking probably 10 minutes right there. And then it dawned on me. I don't have some person that I aspire to. So you know how they say to have great art you must aspire to a great artist in some sense, or to admire someone fantastic so you can kind of mirror that and it makes you greater because they are at such a high pedestal. Well, I don't have one of those. And I was saying in the last video, I was like, well, you know, George Martin, Tolkien, and Robert Jordan, Joe Abercrombie probably, I don't know. And I was like the top guys, the fantasy world, right? And the fantasy books writing and all that. Well, that's who's up there, and I'm sure there's more. I just can't think of it because I'm not really into reading fantasy. But they're the ones that I should, in some sense, be putting on this pedestal. Like, oh, I want to be like Tolkien. I love what he did, and I aspire to be better than that. And that's the goal of it. But I don't have that. Because in some sense, it's coming from inside of me. And I guess I don't necessarily want to look at someone else and just be some mirror to them. I want to reflect myself. So the whole point of this channel, the whole point of the books that I'm writing, the whole point of everything I do is to find myself. But I'm not going about it in the way of another. I've kind of recently realized that I need to find something through myself and only myself. And so because I'm kind of been doing that, it's harder to do because I can't. So my example was, I really loved looking at mythology. I was looking at Celtic mythology, I was looking at Greek mythology. Mostly those two is where I kind of stayed. I was about to venture into Norse, but then I paused. Because I was realizing, well, I don't want to just like copy that shit. And then Eris walks into a room, I'm like, well, what happens here? Well, I don't know, why don't we just do the same thing that happened to Hercules in one of his 7 labors? And we can kind of make a comment on that. And I was like, I don't want to do that, because it kept turning me off. Every time I wanted to do something, it slightly mirrored someone else, and it just turned me off. Now, one of the reasons I said that about, keep in mind I'm trying to tell you everything I said in the last video. But one of the reasons I said that was I was like, I don't necessarily know what myths are. They could very well be what we would understand as memes. How we understand memes to be. That could be just what the mythologies are. Some of them, not every single one of them. Some of them are just reiterations of some political thing where we want to like have some sort of agenda, so we're going to write it this way because it's kind of be, you know, interesting how we do that. You know, all this kind of stupid shit. And it could be, you know, a great man or a great woman or whoever that we're retelling the story of, and it encapsulates an entire era, an entire culture. And I thought, well, that's not necessarily what I'm trying to do either, because I wasn't there. I wasn't them. So now I'm kind of in this like limbo state of like, what the fuck am I to do? What am I to do? And essentially it's like, you're to do yourself. You're to write your own. And so we have to take the giants, we'll say, of fantasy, set them over here. Take mythology, real life mythology, not mine, set it over here. And what am I left with? Well, I'm left with my mythology and my thoughts and my feelings. But then what's going on there? Those are dictated by another. They can't not be, right? Everything I know came from somebody else. Whether it was in person, on a book, on the telephone, on a TV show, a movie, a classroom. It doesn't, you know what I'm saying? It came from another human being. All of my thoughts, right? And as they've come into me, I'm sifting through it and saying, how do I define all this information in a way that is self? How do I define that? And that's been the whole point of the journey of self. And so essentially, what that journey has become is taking everything and setting it aside. It's kind of like that, I don't remember if he was Spanish or not, but there was a philosopher, Descartes, I believe. And his famous thing is, I think, therefore I am. You know, like that's his, one of his, he made a bunch of like little, man, I'm not learned, I'm sorry. But he made a bunch of little things where he's trying to disprove, like, if someone told me this, how do I know they're not lying to me or not? Like, what is truth? What is knowing? And he got to the point where, well, if I think, then I am a person. Like, how do I know I'm a person? Well, he had to get rid of all this stuff and then rebuild again. And in some sense, that's what I seek to do as well. I'm trying to get rid of all these things. So, setting aside fiction, setting aside mythology, I set aside politics, I set aside a lot of aspects of modern culture. I set aside, oh geez, just like modern opinion stuff, because I'm trying to get to what I believe. And so all this information goes away, and then I'm left with this fog. I'm left with this unknowingness, this state of I don't understand anything, because I don't know what I think about it. And so now, that information, let's go to the book again. We're Eris. We don't know what the hell to do. We don't understand what's going on. And yet I'm supposed to write the story? When I told you, the two main ones I'm working on now is Eris and his story in the 1600s, I think. Or 14, because I get my numbers mixed up. It's either 1467 or 1647. I'm dyslexic with numbers. That's Eris now. And then we have Dove, as you could see in the Forgotten series. Both of them are, how should I say, they're acting on their own accord. I use them as, in some sense, as they're the probe into the mind. When I sit down in front of my typewriter and I go, all right, we're writing, I have to sit and dwell upon, like, well, where are we going, Eris? And it's up to him to determine that. It's up to Dove. When Dove went to the World Tree in the last episode of the Forgotten series, I did not know he was going to do that fucking day I wrote it. Not a clue. I wasn't like, and he'll do this. This will be awesome. Like, no, it was, I guess we're here now. And simultaneously, that's what Eris did too. And it always happens that way. So there's that synchronicity to it. And I thought, well then, this must be what we have to do. But I paused. Because I said, what the fuck is the World Tree? And you remember what I told you before? I could copy paste mythology. I could just look at how the Scandinavian people, you know, the Norse people, how they looked at the World Tree. I could just kind of like copy paste that. I could try to get the Celtic understanding of the World Tree. tree of life. I could. I could even do the Kabbalah. I could say, well, why don't I just kind of mirror that? That would be fun, wouldn't it? And I was about to. But then it hit me. Where's you in that? Those were 3 other people's fucking opinions. Collective opinions at that, but opinions nonetheless. Where are you then? Are you going to just go into another thought form? Are you just going to follow somebody else? And I was like, well, no, not on purpose, but what am I supposed to do? I don't know what this tree is. And so I would debate, like, well, then this archetype of this world tree, this tree of life, why the fuck did you do that in the first place? And I said, well, it makes sense to me. There's something about it that I'm like, yes, this seems to make sense to me. And so I'm trusting my instincts. Okay, well, if you're trusting your instincts, then you have to figure out what this world tree is to you. This tree of life. And so far as you say, it's almost like what holds the fabric of a realm into existence. The fabric of the realm, through the roots of this tree, leads up to the branches, which are the sets of realms. And then it hit me. In some sense, I felt as if I was transitioning into a new tier of understanding. A new realm, a new plane, a new dimension. I'm moving into a new dimension. We can say it that way, any way you want. And because of that, through this tree, it's a cerebral experience. And essentially, if you move on to the next tree, it acts as the circles. Do you remember one of my videos, the Forgotten Series, I described to you these fractal circles that exist to be this transitionary period between what's outside of the universe and what's inside of it? Each one of those is we could say, dimension, right? Each dimension has its own understanding. Once you are in that, you learn from it, and you can find a way out of it. You go to the next one. You go to the next dimension. And in saying going to that next dimension, you are left clueless because everything you learned in the previous one makes absolutely no sense here. So you either have to shed it or adapt it. And that's where I find myself right now. Everything I just said, I'm trying to throw away all that I know so I can go into this new place and find new knowledge inside of that. I think it's actually a druidic belief, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember the wordage for it. It was like a noon or something like that, and then there's a cauldron in each one, and that was like this kind of portal, if you will. And that's why I'm like, well, then that's where the druid shit makes fucking sense. Modern druidry, 1700s and on. I'm like, that's why it fucking makes sense to me. As much as you want to smear it, it's like, if this is also how I feel, am I just copying that? I don't know. But it seems to make sense to me. So as I move on to the next tier, I can't necessarily take with me all that old baggage because it'll weigh me down there and I'll get lost. Those tools helped me in that place forevermore. If I need to go back there, I have the tools of that level, right? I learned how to defeat the boss on that level in a video game terms, and I just got to remember the order in which his attacks are so I can counter them. It's much the same, right? Everything we do is a mirror, man. So as I go on to this new level, I'm once again entered into this cave. I always think of it as this dark cave. And I'm stuck in it. And I'm just, okay, here we are. We're in a new place. What do I do? How do I know how to feel? There's no maps here, man. It's unexplored. We're Lewis and Clark, man. We're moving forward into uncharted lands. Except we don't have no fucking guide. It's just us. And the beautiful thing about this, it's all in the mind. And this is what I was telling you about mind travel. Like, everyone wants to go travel around the world because, I don't know, I guess they think they can gain things, which you can, but not what they think they should. And so I'm like, what about mind travel? What about traveling in your own fucking mind? Why don't we want to do that? Why is that so fucking scary? And here I am. I'm backing up the words I fucking say. I'm going into my mind. And I don't feel like I'm on the next plane necessarily. So if it's the fractal circles, as I said, I feel like I'm like between two different realms right now, and I'm getting ready to go into the next one, but I am terrified. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what I need to do. I don't even know who I am necessarily. I have a better understanding of myself. And it's all about trusting myself. I feel that, but I don't know. I'm hoping, I'm praying that I keep, there's like, I kind of think of it like, if we're gonna go to another place, there must be a tether. And the tether leads all the way back to the lowest part. And from 2019 to 2024, I went back to the deepest part of myself. That's what these videos are. I went back to, who the fuck are you before? So you remember in my sense of the mythologies, the chains of time that guide the oh, Jesus Christ. The chains of time that guide the mechanism. Well, the chains are what kind of can be the guiding tool between each circle, between each realm of understanding, each dimension. The chains are what drive that. Back here is the past, here's the future, and then we're kind of in the middle of it. It all works the fucking same. I have two things I'm going to show you. Yo, that's the circle stuff I was talking about. In a circle, this is the tools of it, but this is what I'm talking about. Imagine the fractal circles are in here. There's the future, there's the past, but there's a way into each realm, and that's through the unmanifested and manifested. I've been talking about that for so long. My own personal mythology aiding me. Now, that is the way in which I try to transcend this shit. But because I've been going so far in the past, I had to build back into the fucking future. Who I was as a child, who in my darkest moments, what is the saddest part of me, and I explore that deep sadness. I threw myself so deeply into the darkness of myself that I had to take 3 months off of work. I snapped at work, and I did something I should not have done, and now I came out of that experience, and this channel was born. Because I went so deep and dark into the abyss of my own travesty and my own sadness that I lost myself, and I became someone I'm not, and I did things I should not have done. And coming out of that, I made some more mistakes. I hurt people. And they won't, well, no, it's okay, like, you didn't mean to, like, but I still did. And that's fucking difficult. And I have a hard time handling that right now. But I came out of that and I started moving forward. And I started trying to get better and better and learn more and more. Who am I? And I kept passing into different circles. And now here I sit, about to go into the next one. And I look back once again before I enter in. And I feel like Eris. And he mirrors me. And I always end up getting to this point with Eris. And this is why I think that each realm I'm born into a dark cave or a dark temple or some place that was once something but now not. Or it was perpetually a cave. It always feels that way. Born from Gaia, born from the earth, sprouting into the world. Ascension. And that's where I happen to be at this point. And I want to read to you this something, because I told you every time I'm going with Eris, I come to this fucking point where I'm sitting in this dark place contemplating. I as the author, Eris is the character, like, and then we know we have to do something. And this is the beginning of a new tier, and I want to read it. Okay, this is something I wrote on the typewriter last week. This is a rough draft, keep that in mind, okay? It's by no means edited, and I only read it once. So this is not some polished product, okay? It might be a little rough for me to read it, alright? Just keep that in mind. Just don't do that Nazi fucking grammar shit. Just fucking listen, okay? That's my advice. By the time he thought about it, it was too late. There was far too much behind him to ever have believed there was that last chance. In his heart, he knew there was time, but in that time, what was there? What could he have done otherwise? As many times as he played it over and over in his head, it still did not change the fact that they were all gone. It had been some time since he thought of his parents last. There was guilt there. But once he found them in that quiet moment, he was beside himself in grief. And there was no amount of thoughts that would pull him from that sucking stupor. He was gone down into that grief, and alongside him was that familiar, quiet sensation. One that was so prevalent, one that was so familiar, but never did he notice it until now. It was right in front of him, and he was none the wiser. Anvir, the dream hunter. How could he be so blind? Every moment of grief he was taken by it, and he was none the wiser. And to think he thought he had evaded it, that perhaps the dream hunter was not what it was said to be, though the whole time it was quietly hiding in the fear that swallowed his heart. Wrapped itself around him so tight he believed he never saw that light that shone upon the hollow place before. Was he always here with me? Eris thought. Was Anvir not a deep menace, but rather a quiet, nagging, pestering feeling only come out when absolute sadness has fallen over me? Eris alone in the dark, alone in that darkened cave, though not alone, but with Meteor quietly waiting in the dark. But he might as well have been alone, alone and lost. That cave was the perfect metaphor just where he was trapped. He was deep within the darkness of himself, and there was no clear way out. He turned to Meteor. "What are we even doing here?" he shouted. And as the words left him, did he regret that hatred in his heart. It was bolstered by the shock that flashed across Meteor's face. A man who looked like a schoolboy caught in trouble. We escaped the storm, remember?" Meteor said reluctantly, as if it was a test. Yes, I know. He watched Meteor quietly looking back to him from beyond that rousing fire. There was fear in him as well. Fear of me? Thought Eris. "I'm sorry, Meteor," he continued. "I just don't know what we are, what we are supposed to do." "Now?" Meteor asked kindly. "Always," cried Eris. "I don't know how many more times I have to feel this way, how many more times I have to come once again to this same room, to ruminate in this fear, to be stuck in these helpless thoughts again and again. I want out of this prison. I need out." He looked sharply to Meteor. Meteor only averted his gaze. Eyes that fixed on him within the throes, only to pull itself away when directed to the person in question. A usual experience. Though Meteor said something he did not expect. That is Anvir. That trap. That prison of cycled thoughts. He is that prison. Meteor stood up and grabbed a stone from the ground to draw before Eris symbols upon the ground. One he did not recognize, though one that felt so very familiar. Then Meteor drew another, and another, until finally there was a script before him. That one. "What is it?" asked Eris. "Does that mean anything to you?" Meteor asked him. Eris thought it over for a moment. tracing those symbols within his eyes over and over again. "No," he said finally. "I can't think so." Meantier, with one hand on chin, was deep in thought. "It's old script," he said. "Old Adenian." He went back down to scribbling around those symbols. "What is this even for?" asked Eris. "Aha!" cried Meteor. "Neopak." What now?" asked Eris, more than a little bit annoyed. "You should know. It came from you." "Me?" "Yes, you. Deep down those words were waiting to come out. I could feel them when you were prostrate there. Now tell me, what do you know of Neopak?" "I don't see why this matters." "Do you want to know? Do you want to be rid of Anvir that torments you? Do you want to let go of all that weighs you down?" Meteor shouted at him, clearly frustrated. "Yes," said Eris reluctantly, "but how?" He was cut off. "Just answer me. Neopak. Who is Neopak?" "No, I've never heard that name before. I mean, maybe I have, but honestly, I cannot think of it. And you said it was within me?" "Yes, Eris, within. The ancestors cry out to us all the time, though most of the time we can never hear them. Too focused, too distracted. But I know he called out to you, and I can feel that. Deep within that sadness that claims you, far beyond the grips of Anvir, I could hear that quiet echo reaching out." "What is it he was saying?" "Why don't we find out?" Meteor said with a smile, a devilish one at that. "How? Like in the vision? How he said we would purge Anvir from me? That being, that statue, was that Neopak?" "I don't know. But we must find out if you want to rid this evil spirit. And we must return to that vision, Eris." "Return to it?" "Yes, for I believe he is there. But how can we return to such a vision, a dream?" "Through your memory." And that part ends. And essentially, that is where we find ourselves now. Through the memory, we must access that information which being is passed into you through your dreams, because your ancestors always guide you. And if I'm to figure out myself and to move higher and higher into understanding, then I have to listen to myself. For within myself are all those that brought me here. All those fractal thoughts, all those feelings that were passed on from generation to generation to generation. All of them there to guide me into the next phase to which I will use to explore the deepest parts and the highest parts of myself.